I was very proud to be the son of the very first black bus driver of Bristol. My father's name was Norman Samuels, and he came over to the UK and Bristol specifically in 1960. The 1963 time, a story made it into the media of a chap called Guy Reed Bailey who'd applied to the Bristol Omnibus Company, I believe it was called then. They were advertising for conductors and people to work on the buses. So he decided that he wanted to apply for a job and sent his application in. His name didn't sound particularly black, so he was given an interview date to which he turned up. And to his surprise, when he arrived, he found that the job vacancy was already filled. And then it turned out, legally at that time, the bus company was allowed to discriminate on the basis of colour. And so my father said, what can I do? He didn't feel that he wanted to go out and be such an agitator like Paul Stephenson. But what he did feel he could do was to apply for a job. And so when the opportunity came up in 1963, I think the famous date was August 28th.
To end the long night of their captivity.
When the famous speech, I Have a Dream in America, happened by Martin Luther King Jr. The bus company in Bristol relented and said, we will now allow, not because of the kindness of their heart, but because of the political pressure that was there, they said, we will now allow black people to apply for jobs. And at that point, my father decided that he was going to apply to work on the buses. And he said the day he took his test, people were lining the streets to see him behind the wheel of a Bristol bus because they couldn't quite believe that a black man would actually be on a bus driving behind the wheel. His, if you like, his active resistance against racism was to do something from his point of view very pragmatic, and that was to prove that he was just as capable as the next person of being proficient and professional enough to actually qualify and drive a bus. The date that he became a bus driver on the 15th of October 1964, it was the day I was born.
I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama with its vicious racists.
And I think that when Dr. Martin Luther King had that famous I Have a Dream speech, when he talked about his children being judged by the content of their character rather than the colour of their skin, I think it had a lot of resonance with black people here who wanted to be recognised for their abilities rather than their skin colour being a differentiating factor as to whether or not they were even allowed to be treated equally. With the situation with George Floyd, the news reverberated around the world as to the injustice that happened where this man's life was taken. And I think that created a backdrop here in Britain to say this should never have happened there. And in reality, we still have racism that goes on here. So it fueled, I think, a lot more introspection and discussion and debate as to how equal are we now after all these years have gone, after these decades have gone. In Bristol for a number of years there had been lots of discussions, lots of debates as to what this figure Edward Colston represented. On the one hand, he was kind of revered as a philanthropist and doing lots of things for Bristol, but the reality was underneath that, the wealth, where the wealth came from, the slave trade, was something that was quite abhorrent. I wasn't surprised that the statue was toppled because of what it represented. And whilst we encountered racism, and we still do to this day, where people either overtly or covertly kind of give you the indication that you don't belong here, I feel very much a native son of Bristol. Yes, I have a history that goes through the Caribbean and further back to Africa, but I'm a Bristolian and I'm British, and I don't shirk from that. And one of the things that I think my father always said to me that I always take into heart is, he said, whatever you do, just make sure you do it with passion and with excellence. It's probably my paraphrase. And when I had the awesome privilege of representing Great Britain at the Olympic Games, I was very proud of that because I felt that I was representing Britain, an aspect of Britain, the black people where I'm from, as much as the wider society.